Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning.
Good morning.
Kat, we're on.
Welcome everyone to the Rebel Daily live stream. I am Katherine Krozonouski here in studio, joined with the fabulous and talented Sheila Gunn Reid out in Edmonton. How's it going, Sheila?
I'm great. I cannot get my lighting right in this studio. If my life depended on it, I feel like I look a little bit like an Oompa Loompa in this
I don't see
screen,
that at all.
But okay, great. But you're too nice to say anyways.
Well, I didn't know I was doing this, so I didn't do my hair. I was just brushing it with a fork before, so I look gorgeous.
That's what happens when Ezra leaves us unattended.
Yes, we were scrambling, but we made it work. Thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for coming, and just thank everybody. This is great. I love doing the live stream, so I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad you could fill in. David Menzies is a little bit busy today, and our head of video's away. Ezra's away today, so it's a skeleton crew. We're going to make it through the day because we absolutely have to, and all of our Rebel viewers rely on us. And so today is the Rebel News Daily live stream with Sheila and Katherine, and we're going to get through this by the skin of our teeth. However, we did do a little preparing, and for that I'm very glad. And this gives us a chance to interact with each other, Katherine and I, because we don't almost never work together. I mean, we work together virtually, but not collaborating on stuff like this, which is fun. But it also gives our viewers a chance to interact with each other, and it also gives our viewers a chance to reject the censorship of YouTube and support us in a couple of different ways. So we have a bit of a tradition here at Rebel News because YouTube completely demonetized us a little bit ago, sort of right after the election of Joe Biden. And formerly on YouTube, people could support us doing something called a super chat. But YouTube took that away from us. And really that took a big $400,000 chunk right out of the middle of our company. So it wasn't just something that we did every day, this live stream. It was a revenue vehicle for us. But we love our 1.5 plus million YouTube subscribers. Even you guys who hate watch me. Thank you for the clicks. So we start off on YouTube, and then we will get to a point at which we're going to talk about things on YouTube that YouTube says, you're going to give those people a little too much to think, and we can't have that. So we'll start off on YouTube. We're going to talk about as much as we can there, and then we're going to migrate onto exclusively some of the other platforms that we are also simultaneously streaming on. So those are Rumble, Odyssey, and Super U, and all of those platforms give you the opportunity to support us completely willingly, unlike what Justin Trudeau makes you do for the mainstream media, where he's like, you're not watching that stuff? Doesn't matter. Reaches into your pocket and gives it to you, completely gets things wrong from day to day. So that's what we're doing here. And who dislikes you, who would actively lie about you. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. So let's jump into it. I thought we would start with like a soft story. Ridley Scott, his new movie, The Last Duel, has been in theaters recently, and it apparently lost about $50 million. And he's pulling an Abe Simpson and yelling at a cloud. He's blaming cell phones. He's blaming millennials and cell phones because he thinks that anything that's not on a cell phone, nobody wants to watch. And I'm like, hey, Ridley, I want to watch good stuff. It doesn't need to be on a cell phone for me to, I mean, I'm a millennial. I'm on the upper cusp of a millennial, but it's not because it's not on my cell phone, Mr. Scott. Although I did actually kind of want to watch this movie. Have you heard of it, Sheila, The Last Duel?
No, I don't watch anything even remotely recent. All my music tastes are like 20, 30 years old. Yes. But I am inclined, like Ridley Scott, I am like an older person in an older generation. So I do blame cell phones for a lot of the problems facing the world, from just like generalized toxicity. Yeah, he might be right about that. But could it maybe be the pandemic? Could it maybe be that people don't want to present proof of vaccination before they go to a movie theater? Like, I think there's some of that too. It's not cell phones, it's left-wing society, which is the society that people like Ridley Scott want and actively proliferate. So I guess this moral of the story is careful what you wish for, because you just might get it.
Yeah, I actually don't know what his take on excuse me, on vaccines are. But I wonder if he's one of those people that's like, oh, I don't want you seeing my movie if you're not vaccinated. And then at the same time being like, why are people seeing my movie? It's like, well, Mr. Scott, I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed to go see your movie.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to see like what are the other movies grossing at the exact same time. Like there's that new Lady Gaga one, I think it's called The House of Gucci. I'd be curious to see what the other similar movies are grossing at the exact same time, because maybe it's not the kids that are wrong. Maybe it's you, Ridley Scott. Like I would to like throw
like
that
Skinner meme where he's like, am I so out of touch? It's like, no, it's the children that are wrong. That's Ridley Scott.
Yeah. Maybe it's not the kids. Maybe it's you. Like maybe you just actually made something that the market just doesn't like. And maybe it's time for a little introspection. But, cell phones have been around for a very long time. During the releases of other movies, including other Ridley Scott movies. Yeah. So why is it this one?
Maybe it's just a bad movie. Although I want to see it because I do like Adam Driver. He's super hot, but I feel like, again, he's one of those people that would hate me. Like he probably would be like, please don't see my movie, Katherine. And I'd be like, I'm sorry, Adam. I'm gonna see it anyways. But yeah, I want to see the movie, even though I agree with you. Like, modern movies and television never appeal to me these days because they're just so woke. I really try to enjoy it, but like when the people making it have really bad takes on pretty much every important political issue going on, it's hard to just like put that out of your brain and enjoy the film. So I'll try Ridley, but I'm not allowed to go see it, so I'll have to wait.
I think the difference between conservatives and the left in general is you and I will look at a movie and we're like, I don't like the guy that's in that movie. He said this really stupid thing, but I'm going to try to at least approach the art, if we call movies art these days. I'm not so sure, but we're going to approach the art independent from the artist. But on the flip side, they're the ones who are like, I don't like that guy. I'm boycotting his movie. I hope Clint Eastwood dies. Yeah. A miserable death. Like that's the other side of the thing. But maybe it's just because so much of Hollywood art and music is on the left that if we decided to behave the way the left did, there would be almost nothing for us to consume except country music.
That's
mostly.
The thing. One of our employees, Alex, he doesn't watch any television or movies because he says it's all too woke. And I'm like, what do you watch? He's like, videos on how to farm. And I'm like, I'm not quite there yet. Like, I probably will get there soon. But I'm like, I still enjoy the odd entertainment media piece without just watching like YouTube videos of an actual farmer like farming. I'm not quite there yet.
My husband watches those, and I'm like, yeah, I watch those, and my husband watches those too, and I'm like, but you just spent all day doing that. Why do you have to come in and watch it on TV? Like, try something different. Aren't you getting sick of this? I don't know.
I mean, it's better than The Voice, though, right?
I've never watched that show.
Me either.
I've never watched it. I've never watched it. Not even a little bit.
No. I watched American Idol. Okay, let's move on to David Suzuki.
Yes.
Where do we even start with? I mean, I know that you know a lot about David Suzuki, so maybe you want to take this one. But basically, he made those comments on that video, that comment on that video the other day saying you're going to see if politicians don't side with basically Extinction Rebellion on this pipeline issue, that people are going to start blowing up pipelines.
Yeah, David Suzuki, this should really come as no surprise to anybody. He has a lifetime of making these wild and crazy remarks. Maybe let's just throw to his remarks so people know what we're dealing with here. But again, this should really come as absolutely no surprise. He's been like this from the very beginning. This is nothing new. It's not like he's getting out of control in his old age, sort of like Joe Biden. This is David Suzuki. So maybe let's just roll that and then we'll talk about him.
We're in deep, deep doo-doo. And they've been telling us, the leading experts, for over 40 years. This is what we're come to. The next stage after this is they're going to be pipelines blown up. We're in deep, deep.
That sounds like a threat.
That's eco-terrorism. That's a pretty overt threat. And you alluded to this. So The reason I know a fair share about David Suzuki is back in 2018, the University of Alberta decided to give him an honorary degree. And the University of Alberta is supported largely by large oil companies who give grants and bursaries to the university, but they've never really been honored by the university for basically supporting it for 70 years. But they were going to give this honorary degree to David Suzuki. And a lot of like pretty incredible oil field technology has been developed, in part at least, with the University of Alberta. You know, it's one of the reasons we can get the oil sands out of the ground. And yet they were giving this honorary degree to David Suzuki. So I thought, we know a lot about him. We've done a lot of research on him. The boss did a lot of research on him when he was at Sun News. Let's quickly hammer out a book and ruin his day, which is exactly what we did. And it's called The Case Against David Suzuki, an Unauthorized Biography. And in the book, we go through some of the things that David Suzuki really is sort of a creation of the CBC. He's not a climate scientist. He's a fruit fly geneticist who sees humans as a plague upon the earth. I think he even actually described us once as maggots. And so CBC sort of presents him as the national conscience. But he's anything but. He's prickly, he's rude, and he's an eco-radical. So yeah, look at some of these. The darling of the CBC and the Liberal Party who bluffed his way through Canadian society. That's pretty true. Anyways, the book is still available. It's available on suzukibook.com. And I think that was my second or third bestseller. Anyways, we quickly cranked it out and we ruined his big day. So, but with regard to his comments about blowing up pipelines, for a lot of us in Alberta who are of a certain age, I would say in our fourth decade of life, it's in our memory, our collective memory, because in the 90s, we had a real problem with eco-terrorism, blowing up well sites, wellheads, batteries. And it happened in the Peace Country in northwestern Alberta, in and around the Hythe area. And there's some controversy about how much of it was done by the people responsible and how much of it was done by the RCMP to catch the people responsible. But ultimately, Weibo Ludwig, who was sort of a, I don't want to say cult leader, but it might fit. He was a reformed minister who had a compound at Trickle Creek where it was his family and another family. And he was convicted and sent to jail for 5 years for the bombings and vandalisms that took place in northwestern Alberta. And I'm old enough to remember being scared of my brother going to work when he had to work in the north, because I didn't know what would happen to him. We didn't know when the bombings would happen or anything like that. So these threats to Albertans, it's scary and it's real. It's not something that, it's just some old guy talking out of his rear end. We lived through this, a lot of us, and it's very real to us. And it was a very dangerous time because men were going to work to support their families, to try to get ahead, and you didn't really know what would happen to them on a day-to-day basis. And so for him to make these threats, I mean, the response of the Alberta government, as outraged as they were, I think was spot on. I think it was completely sincere by Alberta's Minister of Environment, Jason Nixon, because he really called it what it is. This is not just some old guy just saying things on the CBC to be controversial. This is eco-terrorism, and we lived through it. Here's the clip from Jason Nixon. Oh, we need some sound.
People and industries. This is completely unacceptable and extremely. David Suzuki is so out of touch with the real world that he advocates, Mr. Speaker, for eco-terrorism towards Canadian people and industries. This is completely unacceptable and extremely reckless. The NDP, Mr. Speaker, sadly have a long history of collaborating with David Suzuki and their silence on his outrageous comments made them complicit with calls for eco-terrorism towards Albertans and Canadians. David Suzuki is so out of touch with the real world.
There's about a 4-minute video that we published of the environment minister just giving Suzuki the business end of the government. He's called on the legislature to basically rebuke and renounce what David Suzuki has said. The NDP in Alberta, they have absolutely not renounced any of David Suzuki's statements. And that doesn't really surprise me, because after the NDP took power here, they appointed some of the most radical environmentalists in the entire country from British Columbia to positions of power in the Alberta government, and most notably on the Oil Sands Advisory Group. So we had Sephora Berman and Karen Mahone, both of which were with Stand Earth. They have both been arrested at eco-protests, hauled away in handcuffs. Berman very recently. Berman also, she was also involved in some of the anti-logging protests at Clayoquot Sound. They called it the War of the Woods. And what the eco-radicals there would do, and I'm not saying Berman did this, but she was there when it happened as one of the most prominent people there. They would hammer spikes. It's called spiking. They spike the trees so that the loggers don't come along and cut them down, but they've got to come do the cut block. So what can happen is they'll hit the spike, their chainsaw can buck back and seriously injure them, or it can cause a catastrophe in the mill when the blade hits that, and it could shear off the spike, it can fly out and hit somebody, or cause some damage with the blades, shrapnel flying off. But it was a very dangerous time for loggers on Vancouver Island because of the kind of people like Sephora Berman, who was on the ground. So for the NDP to not renounce David Suzuki, no surprise, because not only are they friends of these people, they appointed them to some of the highest positions in the Alberta government when it comes to overseeing our oil and gas. And it's just outrageous. And this happens right out at front.
Right? Like,
yeah.
He's an eco-terrorist and he's in the friggin' cabinet, the Prime Minister's cabinet.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the Minister of Environment now, and he was arrested for his protests. And in Alberta, we're supposed to be like, no, it's fine. He's the Environment Minister of all of Canada. He's going to deal with us fairly, and he's absolutely not. I mean, I wonder what the relationship is between Stephen Guilbeault and David Suzuki, because Stephen Guilbeault founded Equiterre and was in charge of Equiterre for nearly 2 decades. Equiterre took money from the Tides Foundation, which is the American eco-granting charity that was behind, along with the Rockefeller Foundation, the tar sands campaign, which was basically a demarketing campaign of Canadian oil and gas. It's why the oil sands have a stigma that California oil doesn't have, that Iranian oil doesn't have, that Iraqi oil doesn't have, that Russian gas doesn't have. It's because these American environmental charities, they're not really environmental charities, they don't actually protect the environment, but these environmental charities engaged in this really slick anti-marketing campaign of Canadian oil and gas to end pipelines and landlock it, and it worked. It worked. Here we are. We can't even twin a pipeline to the West Coast, and they are suffering gas shortages now there because we had to close in the pipeline that we had because of the flooding.
Yeah, I will admit I'm extremely ignorant on pipelines, and I mean, we were talking about it before, but it's like, from living in my little like insulated Toronto world, I'm just like, all I know about gas is I pump it into my car and I get like annoyed when the price goes up, but I don't understand why that's happening. And you're living through it, and you, like you said, your brother worked in the oil fields, and your husband as well, right? So my brother, my husband, my dad, my father-in-law, my brothers-in-laws, my friends. Well, thank you for filling my car.
And that's the thing, like, the problem is, we have the world's 3rd largest proven oil and gas reserves. We are, North America's Saudi Arabia, and then some. And another thing too is Alberta is sort of North America's Saudi Arabia of coal that never really gets talked about. And instead, parts of our country are relying on foreign imports where they don't have the human rights standards. They don't do the things that the left tells me they care about. The left are the ones that are always about human rights and women's rights and sexual minority rights. But they're perfectly fine to support oil and gas regimes. So Saudi Arabia, Iran, they're Algeria, Nigeria, they're perfectly fine to prop up those governments every time they pump gas into their car. And yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is a great article. And every day, actually, I check the price of fuel in the lower mainland of BC. And I check for what they are experiencing on Vancouver Island right now. Because these, by and large, these are people who vote against parties that support pipelines. And so, again, this is a symptom of careful what you wish for, or you just might get it. Because now you have a problem with supply shortages because the pipeline you hate is shut in. And here we are. And I don't like the human suffering of it all. I don't like the fact that some people are going to have to choose between, do I buy a brick of cheese this week or do I fill my car up? I don't like that. But sometimes people need to be mugged by reality.
Yeah. Well, this ties in really well to our next topic, which is that there was a journalist who was, well, we can debate on what she was doing there, but she was covering the protests and she was arrested in British Columbia for doing so. It caught my eye because, you know, we're journalists and we cover protests, and it would be, and we've had journalists arrested and definitely harassed. But it's interesting to think, like, well, was she there in support of the protests and just getting in the way and causing more havoc, and she just happened to have a camera with her? Or is she like us, who is a journalist who also maybe has, who's not completely unbiased? We're not. Like, I covered the freedom protests on the weekend, and I don't do it. I try to be unbiased when I'm there speaking to people, but I'm at the same time, I like that they're there. I like what they're doing. So does that make me not a journalist when I cover that? It's an interest. Like, I don't want to be arrested, and I don't think she should have been arrested unless, of course, she was like, I mean, we don't know. Maybe she was pushing police officers and causing trouble. I don't actually know. But what are your thoughts on that?
So I think I'm of the same mind as you. So I did a little research into who Amber Bracken is. And she is on assignment for the BC-based outlet, The Narwhal, which is a far left-wing pro-environmentalist publication. I think it's supported largely through grants from environmental charities and the federal government.
Oh, they get federal.
I mean,
that's funny.
Yeah. So, you know,
so she's a real journalist then.
Right, because she gets federal funding. And that's something people might notice in some of their local news reporting. Oh, my pen is green, so you can only see the top. In some of their local news reporting is that you're like, where's all this climate change nonsense coming from in my local newspaper? And it's because some of the federal government funding for journalism was attached to hiring a climate and environmentalism reporter. So if you needed to pay for staff, you have to support a certain amount of that sort of pro-government journalism.
It's funny how they don't do the same with civil liberties. No one
we
cares about that.
So anyways, getting back to Amber Bracken, she was there working for the Narwhal with a documentarian, and they were both arrested, and they have to appear in court in February. So she was working for a media publication supported by the government, but regardless, I don't make the decisions about who or what isn't media in this country. Neither should the government, neither should anybody else. That stuff has already been determined in the Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. She was friendly to the protests there, but like you say, you are also very friendly with the protests that we go to. Naturally, I am too. So I guess it comes down to what happened when they arrested her. What was she doing? when they arrested her? Was she standing off to the side covering what was happening and what was happening to the protesters, and how they were being treated as they were being arrested? And then she got arrested. I've got a real problem with that, because that happens to our journalists all the time. They are, notably in Toronto, when they record the police mistreatment of protesters, then the police turn on them, on our guys. At Montreal also. So I guess, was she engaged in protesting? Was she on the protest line when the protesters were being arrested? Because there is an injunction, I think, that Coastal GasLink, yes. So there's an injunction order that Coastal GasLink has preventing people from being on site to protest. And naturally, that's trespassing. Get out of there. None of you have first aid, any of the H2S training, WMIS, none of the stuff that normal people who work on these job sites have to get on the job site. The protesters don't have that. So it's unsafe for them to be there. It's dangerous. And if one of them gets hurt, well, guess who gets in trouble? The company, right? So they've had a judgment, an injunction, keeping people off these sites since December of 2019. So if she was violating that injunction by being on the site, I guess there are a set of circumstances surrounding that. But if she's off the site but documenting what's going on, so she's not breaking the injunction but doing her job, why was she arrested?
Yeah.
Why? But on the flip side, this stuff happens to us all the time. And nobody reports on it. They're just like, well, they had it coming. They're sympathetic to those anti-lockdown people. They shouldn't have been there, is what we get. But, this girl gets a tweet from the CAJ, the Canadian Association of Journalists, write-ups in all the major publications that also get funding from Justin Trudeau. The CAJ has written a letter to the BC RCMP on her behalf. But our people, it was like a year of constant arrests happening to our people. We had to sue the federal government to just be able to go to a debate. We're routinely blocked. I was almost blocked from the Red Deer courthouse yesterday because the bailiff was like, I don't recognize your news agency. And I'm like, I don't care.
I don't recognize you, bailiff.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't care. I'm accredited in Court of Queen's Bench and I'm just going to go on in. And that was the end of the conversation that I had. But this stuff happens to us so frequently that it's almost like just another part of our day.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm at. I can actually sit here and say, if this girl was just doing journalism and she wasn't violating the injunction and she wasn't actively engaged in protesting at the exact same time on the injunction site, because again, I'm not against protests, but please don't violate this injunction that is meant to keep you safe from being harmed because there's construction equipment around and you guys have never been near work in your life.
I was going to say, they have no idea what they're like me. They're like, machines? Ooh.
Yeah, exactly. So if that's the case, then of course, why was this girl outraged? Why was she arrested? Why does she have to go to court in February? I can take that stance because it's ideologically consistent. I believe in freedom of the press. It would just be nice if someone also believed in that for us too.
Yeah. Well, I like that. It's an interesting topic. Switching gears majorly, I have a video. This is just a silly
I love
thing.
This video.
Switching gears.
I love this video. It's my favorite.
Pure silliness.
It's my favorite.
Which is actually my specialty. I went down with our intern Isabel on Friday to Yonge and Dundas Square. It was Ezra's idea to go to the heart of the city of Toronto, where the Toronto is incredibly important. The GTA basically is incredibly important for federal elections. Whoever wins the GTA generally wins Canada. So in an effort to win Canada, Erin O'Toole sold out Conservatives and tried to get in with the moderates and the Liberals in city centres like the GTA. He lost the election. He lost votes from Conservatives to the PPC. He didn't win over enough moderates. So I wanted to know, was it worth it, Erin? So we brought a picture with us downtown to Dundas Square and asked random people on the street, who is this guy? And let's see what happened.
Does anyone in Toronto know Erin O'Toole? Anyone?
I don't know when they say, who's these?
Do you know who this is?
No. Should I know who it is?
It's not a judgment. Hello? No? Katherine Krozonouski for Rebel News. I am in Dundas Square in downtown Toronto today talking to people about Erin O'Toole. Now, during the federal election, Erin O'Toole sold out Conservatives in an effort to win over the moderates and even Liberals in the GTA because it's a majorly important jurisdiction for the federal election, as we found historically. So we're here in Dundas Square. We want to talk to people, and we want to find out if people even know who this guy is. Let's go see what they say. Excuse me. Hi. Do you know who this is?
No,
No? Does he look familiar in any way?
not really.
We'll take that as a no. Do you know who this is? I'm just trying to figure out who this guy is. Do you know who he is?
I don't know when they say who's these.
You never seen him before? Hey guys, do you know who this is?
No.
No? You never seen him before?
No, we don't.
Do you know who this is? No? You've never seen him before? Do you know who this is?
No,
No.
but his face looks familiar. I might have seen him on TV.
He's the guy that ran against Justin Trudeau in the last election.
Okay, yeah. What do you think?
Well, it doesn't matter what I think, he lost, right?
Yes, he lost.
So far nobody knows, but we're gonna find someone, I swear. Do you guys know who this is?
I don't.
No? Looking for anyone who knows who he is. We're in the heart of the city of Toronto. Nobody knows Erin O'Toole. Let's keep going. Do you guys know who this guy is? No? Do you know who he is? No? That's not surprising. He thought he was going to be prime minister. So he Oh. Excuse me, sir, do you know who this is? No. All right. Do you know who this is? Do you know who this guy is? Oh, we got one! One person knows who he is. Wow.
I do.
Yeah?
I do. What's his name? O'Toole, right?
What did he do?
He's he was running for one of the parties, no?
Yes, very good. Conservatives, yes. Do you know who this guy is? No?
Not sure. No.
Do you know Justin Trudeau?
Yeah.
This is the guy that ran against him in the federal election, but nobody knows who he is. Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure.
Do you know who this is?
Is that the Conservative Party leader?
Yes, it is. Erin O'Toole. We're just asking people if they know who he is because nobody knows who he is.
Yeah, I don't like who he is, but I know who he is.
Yeah, there you go.
He's in the news a lot because a lot of the people in his party see him as a loser. And I vote for one of the other parties, so the longer the Conservatives keep him, the better for Canada.
Wow.
Because it guarantees that his party will not form a government, in my opinion.
That's an interesting opinion, and I appreciate it.
But that's definitely Erin O'Toole, and I can't say good luck to him.
That's okay. That's all I need.
I
Thank
wish
you.
him good health. That I'll say.
Do you guys know who this is? Okay, fair enough. Are you guys from Toronto, Canada? Do you know who this is? It's not a judgment.
I know who other people are, but I might not know who that guy is.
Okay. Well, this is the leader of the Conservative Party who ran against Justin Trudeau. And it's kind of, I mean, it's a popularity contest, right? And he's not very popular around here because nobody knows who he is.
The other thing about conservative is sometimes like it's more of like a cultural talking point that they inherited from their family, that they're not really believe right-wing stuff. It's just what their grandparents.
You think all conservatives are like that?
Obviously, no. I'd never generalize all conservatives. There are people who are very intelligent and have nuanced opinions who are conservative and right-wing, 100%. But there are some people who just don't think about politics and agree with what
I
they're.
mean, that goes on both sides, right?
100%. There's very bullheaded, ignorant people on the left as well. 100%.
Both sides, both sides.
I love how that
That's so
guy
funny.
was like, I never generalize, and I'm about to generalize.
I just thought that was so funny because it shows it, you know, it's like it's not a scientific science experiment, but neither is voting, like neither is opinion polling really. but it shows that sacrificing the support in Western Canada, those ridings in Alberta that flipped Liberal thanks to a vote split, and it was really because of a vote split, because people in Alberta, it's one of the best things about us, but it's one of the things that makes us difficult to handle and kind of unpredictable when it comes to politics is we don't like when our conservatives are not conservative enough. That's why we fracture our parties all the time. That's why Reform Party started here, is because we thought the PCs were corrupt and gross. And then that's why the Wild Rose started here, and it fractured off the main PC party of old, is because after 40 years, we also thought provincially they were too corrupt. And we're doing it again to Erin O'Toole, that some of those ridings, enough votes flipped over to the PPC, because Erin O'Toole not only didn't earn their vote, but actively went out of his way to lose their vote. Mm-hmm. And your video shows that it was all for nothing, because nobody in Toronto knows who the heck he is. And the ones that did know, you helped them. They were like, what's his name? What's his name? You helped them. They couldn't even land his name.
I started asking people if they know Justin Trudeau, and of course everybody did. And I was like, oh, cool, like he was the guy that ran against him. And then I started asking people if they knew Jagmeet Singh, and they all did.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because Erin O'Toole has such an immemorable face. Unmemorable? What's the word? Immemorable?
Yeah.
Non-memorable face. I don't know if it's his face or his politics, but nobody seems to like that guy. We did find one person who liked him and who knew him, and it was the man dressed up as Santa Claus.
That's okay. I'm happy to hear Santa is conservative. But yeah, there's something, it's sort of, his name isn't outstanding. There's nothing, he just likes like everybody's uncle, which is fine. So did Stephen Harper. But don't get me wrong, I kind of like my politicians a little bit boring. Mm-hmm. It's why Trump was kind of jarring for me at the beginning. I'm like, well, he's a little bit too exciting for me. So, I liked how boring Stephen Harper was with his gray sweater and his pet chinchilla. His
Lego
fine.
hair.
His little Lego lid.
Yeah, like you could clip that hair in and out.
Yeah, which was fine. Like, I didn't mind that, because at least while his appearance never changed and his demeanor never changed, neither did his policies. He didn't flip-flop on much. And that's the thing with Erin O'Toole.
Yep.
With Justin Trudeau, you know what you're getting. It's idiocy. It's ideologically driven. It's radicalism. It's flighty. It's shallow.
Pro-China.
But he's never really pretended to be anything else. Erin O'Toole pretended to be one thing and did another, and then he's like, but give me your votes. Okay, no, we don't do that here.
Yeah, I
heard AG whispered in your ear.
Next, maybe you want to take this one on. The Nobody Speaks French west of Ottawa, which is like the majority of Canada. We're seeing there's all these bilingualism mandates in private companies, but people are like, well, we don't speak French at all. And we were talking about that this morning. You say people in Alberta are like, French? Why do we need French?
Well, yeah, and we have these like French pocket communities like Legal, like Beaumont, where like just for, I don't know, to show off that they have French speakers there, like a French settlement, that they'll put sometimes the bilingual signs. But this is Alberta, give me a break. Everybody speaks English here. And it used to just be the federal public service, right, that you needed to speak French to be a part of. And because of that, the upper echelons of the public service always were Laurentians, people not from this part of the country. It's why it was so controversial at the time, I guess, when Diefenbaker, a guy from the prairies, was elected to the Prime Minister's office. And then with Stephen Harper, everyone's like, oh, is his French good enough? Who cares?
Yeah, I remember that being such a
We don't have interpreters anymore? Yeah. And so you end up also with a lot of people like the Supreme Court of Canada. They're all not from this part of the country, because to end up on the Supreme Court of Canada, you have to be fluently French. If you're going to be the Governor General, you have to be fluently French. And so it excluded a lot of Westerners from that important part of the government, which is why we always felt like we're not reflected in the government, because we weren't. But it's more than that now, because now it's, if you want to be, I don't know, in charge at Air Canada, you have to speak French. Why? Now this is the private sector. This is the government's weird quest to protect the French language, even though there's an entire province dedicated to French. Why now is this bleeding down into the private sector? This has been sort of on the radar of J.J. McCullough, who's sort of a contrarian, conservative-ish commentator for a long time. But he pointed this out, that, this quest to have everybody in charge of anything in this country speak French, it's absurd and it's discriminatory. Let's
Absolutely.
Scroll down here. 2% of Albertans are French speaking. Fewer people than who live in all of Red Deer, Alberta. Yeah, we've got a 97% English speaking population, and only 7%, and I'm rounding up, of us are fluently bilingual. So that means only 7% of us could ever qualify for serious public sector jobs.
Yeah, look at Ontario. It's just 4%. I mean, that makes sense. And in Toronto, you rarely hear French speaking. And when I do, I think, oh, they must be from Quebec. They are welcome here, of course.
Yeah,
but they're probably from Quebec.
Yeah, I'm more likely to see somebody. I'm more likely to see like somebody resettled from Haiti here who speaks French than somebody from Quebec.
Or someone from France.
It's just. Yeah, from actual France.
Yes. Who doesn't like our French? So snobby.
And and there's also this quest for like, you have to learn it. You have to learn it to be able to function in Canada, that it's this part of the Canadian identity. And for me in the West, that sort of disregards our own culture, our own heritage. I don't come from a part of the country where French is the second language. I come from a part of the country where Ukrainian is the second language, or Polish is the second language. And to the point where you can take Ukrainian immersion at school because it's reflective of the culture here.
Really?
So why do... Yeah, you can take Ukrainian immersion here.
Cool.
Yeah. My dad used to, I'm not Ukrainian at all. I don't know how I dodged that. I don't know how I dodged that bullet, because everybody here is. The phone book is just like Ukrainians and Polish last names.
I would fit in so well there.
You would do well. But he learned Ukrainian just because all of his friends at school spoke Ukrainian, and it was sort of the language of business for farmers, right? Like if you went to a farm auction, if you overheard them speaking in Ukrainian about the next item that was coming up and who was going to bid what, you needed to know Ukrainian if you wanted to get in on the good deal. And even on the radio, there's the Ukrainian hour. Like they play Ukrainian music and the hosts are speaking in Ukrainian.
I'm so ignorant.
Yeah, but see, for us, we are like, yeah, that's perfect, because everybody hears Ukrainian. This is part of our culture. We're not far removed from it. Everybody's grandma still does, Ukrainian Christmas and Ukrainian Christmas Eve, and we have more onion dome churches than anywhere else in North America. But so when they force French down our throat, we're like, but this isn't who we are. So why do we have to speak this language to get ahead? This isn't us. And again, it's because we're culturally distinct, just like they are in Quebec. They just don't want to recognize us.
Yeah. On that note, it's time, unfortunately, to say goodbye to YouTube. Everyone, there is a link in the description to take you over to Odyssey, Super U. I think Rumble is where we live most. Yes, Rumble is the place. If you click on the link, it'll take you to Rumble. But we're going to switch over, leave YouTube, and we're going to start talking about some more spicy topics. Oh, and you can send your super chats in through Rumble as well, and we will read them on the air. We already have a few coming in here.